Welcome to Full Throttle Talk, the podcast where horsepower meets conversation. From supercars to classic legends, high revving tech to motorsport mayhem, we cover it all. Straight from the driver's seat, whether you're a gearhead, a racer, or just love the thrill of the open road, you're in the right place. Buckle up, hit the gas, and let's go full throttle into today's episode. Welcome back. It's Full Throttle Talk, and this is your favorite weekly podcast. Obviously, I'm here with Greg, I'm here with Paul, and I'm Tim Harris, and we are really going to hit the ground running. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your continued support over on Instagram. And, something came out that surprised all of us last week were the new iTunes podcast rankings. And this podcast, believe it or not, I still have a hard time even, saying this, but I think we're number 50 in the world for automotive podcasts, which is extraordinary. So there's 5 million podcasts in the world. And this was number 50. I'm not saying there's 5 million automotive podcasts. I really don't know how many there are. But look, the point is that people are listening. People are watching. You guys like our jib jab, which makes us happy. So guys, let's get rolling. What is the biggest automotive enthusiast focused headline from our last podcast that really raised your eyebrow? Greg, you can go first. What's the thing that really caught your eye? I know we were exchanging some texts about different ideas.
Well, I think the Audi thing, we talked about that yesterday, just the tariff impact, and Audi's holding like 29,000, cars in port until this tariff thing happens. So, if Porsche follows suit, everybody follows suit where they're just not sending cars our way as a way to fight against it. That would be very interesting to see what happens. Obviously, the used car market will go back through the roof like it was during the COVID timeframe, probably, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I have a buddy who is actually going to work at a new dealership, and he's like, I don't know if my job's going to be there if there's not a dealership there in 6 months, So, yeah, that's really crazy.
Did one of the manufacturers, maybe you guys picked this up, I really don't remember, say that they're going to, I think it was Mercedes, they're going to eat all the tariff. That's going to be the only solution, basically. The manufacturers are just going to have to, suck it up buttercup and have the, tariff not passed on to the consumer.
The tariff, sorry, Paul, the tariff's so big, though, they can't eat all that.
Yeah. And they can't eat it forever. I mean, BMW, I think all the manufacturers are going to absorb part of it or all of it for a very short time. But, the other ramification of this is, like, for instance, Toyota. They make some cars in Japan, some cars here. They can't, if the cars here will be tariff-free, they can't cannibalize that. So the prices of those are going to go up. I think it's just going to cause inflation one way or the other across the car market.
I don't understand what you just said. So you're saying,
so like, for instance, Toyota, the Corolla is completely made in the US. That is a US product. It will have no tariffs. But some of the, I don't know what the Forerunner or some of the other products that are made out of this country will have tariffs, or even like Camry or something like that. I'm not sure which ones. But if they have one that's extremely high and one's extremely low, they're going to kill the sales off of one. And I think even other manufacturers like Ford, who may have a lot of their cars exempt, it'll raise their prices as well because, hey, we can raise our prices 10% because those are 25% and we're still a deal. I think they'll be opportunistic on it. And I think it'll be manufacturers just trying not to cannibalize the sales of their other products that are tariffed.
I mean, that's a good theory. I don't know. I hadn't heard that one before. I do notice that Ford and a lot of the other domestic manufacturers are definitely being very, very aggressive. So go them, but who knows? I personally, the way it seems to have worked out since they announced these tariffs, just like last week, it definitely seems like it's a tactic to get to the point where there's going to be, I think, freer trade that happens around the world. But let's not even talk politics because it triggers a lot of people. I think ultimately what I'm hoping happens, I think everyone's hoping happens, is that we start to see more production and manufacturing of automotive related stuff, since it's a car podcast, right, domestically. And like it was already, in Tennessee, they make Volkswagen trucks, I think it is. And so you guys mentioned Porsche. Porsche is now saying that they're going to look into possibly creating or making their own vehicles it's in Chattanooga, Tennessee, making their own vehicles in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So could very well be that there'll be some sort of forbearance given if you're going to make a pledge to create make vehicles domestically, that they'll lessen up on the tariff. I don't know, but who knows? I mean, yeah, it is pretty incredible though. That's for damn sure. It's like,
yeah. And one thing that's not being mentioned really, like I know the jobs, I'd love to have the jobs back in the US. Obviously I never think they should have left. Like, I think
Yep.
shame on all the big car companies forever, but they're being forced to get a lower price point. And how do we do that? So nothing's going down in price. Can we all agree on that? Like, all this stuff is going to increase prices across the board on everything. And tell me how prices will get lower through this process. I just don't see it. I mean, they'll bring it back to the US when it's financially feasible for them to bring it back to the US, meaning it costs them more to produce it elsewhere. So, you've got a $60,000, Ford F-150 that parts are coming from overseas and it's whatever assembled in Canada or whatever it is. It's not coming back to the US until it's a cheaper proposition. And it's not going to be a cheaper proposition until it gets so expensive because of tariffs. So the prices, I don't see where prices will come down in any form over the next ever, honestly. I mean, I think we're just on a unfortunate price hike across the board for everybody.
Well,
Tell me
that's
I'm wrong.
but that's assuming that there isn't a reduction of tariffs, right?
I think the genie's out of the bottle, honestly.
Well, right. But I mean, very well could be a month from now, no one's even talking about tariffs anymore. It could just be very well for a month from now, all these tariffs, this tariff conversation we're off to the next thing, and the tariff wars are over, and Trump's going to wave his red flag or whatever it is, right? I mean, it could very well be that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes sense, so, but let's move on, because I don't even want to go slightly political, because it is so interesting. You can always tell where people get their news based on their opinions on certain topics, and tariffs are definitely one of them, or where in the country they live. And yes, I'm talking about you, Paul. All right. So let's move on. There was a really cool text we got that Paul was very celebratory of this morning, talking about Leno's law. So let's hear it.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about, Paul, is from your professional perspective, what are the ramifications of Leno's law in California?
It's just so really quick, Senate Bill 712 here in California. I have watched for the last 30 years of this law, versions of this law come up where they're trying to basically give smog exemption for older cars that are classic cars that are lightly used show cars, which, as car enthusiasts, we think we're everything, but we're really just a microcosm of the political scene. And in the end, there's been senators that are car people. They haven't been able to get it passed because there's always been this sort of compromise with EPA and other organizations, and it's just not worth the political chip you have to keep moving around. But anyway, Jay Leno, for whatever reason, got involved with this. They had the committee yesterday to get it out of the Senate Transportation into Appropriations, which it normally never passes. It passed 9-2. And they had, I think, over 200 cars, kind of like a sit-in, march, drive-in of smog cars that should be smog exempt that weren't, like mid 70s to mid 80s cars, kind of rally up to the Sacramento. And this is the closest I think it's been to passing, which the implications is if you have a 35-year-old car, so 1990 and older, and it's used as a classic car, not a daily driver. And there's a bunch of conversations of how they're going to prove that. Could be through insurance, which they already have the mechanism. You would no longer have to smog it every 2 years, which it would be one thing if you're in California and you have a 2000 or newer car, which is the overwhelming majority. 99% of the cars on the road are 2000 and newer. You pull up to a smog station, they plug a thing in your car, 10 minutes later, $50 later, you're done. Not with anything older than 1999. And if it's older than 90, if it's 95 and older, it's even more complicated. You have to go find the smog station that still has the dynos that work. You have to find, for 95 and older, you have to find another test, and the problem is these tests are being used so infrequently that the machines are broken. They can do 10 2000 and newer tests while they do one of our cars. So you call up a shop, and if it isn't legitimately broken because it's underused, they'll just tell you it's broken because it's not worth their money, because they can only charge you so much by the state's requirement. So Jay Leno kind of joked about it. He says, I put more miles on my classic cars looking for smog stations than I do driving them for fun. And tongue in cheek, he's not wrong. And I see these cars, and literally, if I've got two buyers and they want a car that's especially a 95 and older, but certainly 99 and older. And one's in California and one's legitimately outside of California. The outside of California will get it, which sucks for me because that car leaves and it doesn't mean it's coming back, which, the cars I sell locally, there's like a 30% chance I'm getting that car back to sell. So I think from a time standpoint, I am smogging a car twice a week. Each time, that's a 2.5 hour, so 5 hours a week of my work week is smogging cars. And these aren't cars I can give it to some young kid to drive. They're kind of specialty cars. They're fragile. I have to explain, like half the time the techs don't even know where the engine is, let alone where the smog certificate is. It is just a sobering experience. And I get so frustrated. Then you talk about my car collectors. I mean, here's one thing I read through all the different courthouse news services and stuff. I didn't see anything about it, but the indirect effect that I think they're really missing it, which I think would get, and by the way, this is a pretty bipartisan vote. It's not party driven, it's car driven, got people. Is they're talking about the fact that the lost revenue. I know that I would say a third of the cars that do Montana aren't because they're trying to evade taxes. They're just not going to deal with smog. And they'll register. And most of these collectors have houses in Scottsdale or Lake Tahoe or Idaho, and they're going to register them elsewhere. They get used 500 miles a year. They'll leave them here. And I think indirectly, the revenue from this of people who would be glad to pay extra to not smog their car and pay the sales tax would stay here.
Yeah. So you said a couple things that I want clarification on. Hopefully, So first of all, how are you going to prove that it's not being driven every day? Number one. And don't tell me it's not some sort of a silly insurance plug-in GPS thing. All right.
No.
And the second, all right. So just clarification. So you're saying, and listeners, don't worry, this is a California, special issue, not necessarily nationwide.
Here's the thing about it is California tends to set the tempo for a lot of legislation in other states. Now, there's a lot of states out there that have 25 and 20-year smog, and I think this is the beginning of them seeing how to do it. And like the state of Washington, I think is 20 years, and Nevada might be 15 years. But a lot of these states could really actually just get rid of it. I think the owners of the smog stations would love it. I talked to our smog guy. Having the dyno in his shop to do our cars once a week or twice a week is like 50% of his workers' comp insurance. Like, it's
wow,
ridiculous. You have a thing spinning 25 miles an hour on the floor of your shop. Tell me that the insurance companies aren't going to love to have that thing gone out of there. So I think the repercussions of this are huge and positive for everyone, regardless of party line. But I think, and I've always said this for the last 10 years, the infrastructure is there. We have a classic plate in California. It says a historical vehicle plate you can get for 25 years or older for a very short time. We're talking 2 years. It was, if you had that plate, you were smog exempt. Well, people took advantage of it. So you can still buy a historic plate. It's for 25-year-old vehicle, and it has nothing but just to say, my car's old, which you can kind of tell looking at it. But so they already have the plates made. When you register a car in California, you have to submit your insurance, and it goes with like a weird 4-digit code. All of the specialty use, whether it's exotic car, classic car, parade, they have a 3-digit code. It's a little bit different code. So they have to, and they have to submit it to the state hey, I have insurance. When you buy a car, I have to submit it. And so now they would already have an indication that to have that kind of insurance, you have to have a specialty use, which is low use, which is the key. So the insurance is already doing this for them. To me, I always thought, I know I'm simplifying it. They just flip a light switch. All of a sudden, you get a thing in the mail, hey, for X amount of dollars, and they could probably charge everyone $200 extra every 2 years to renew their smog exemption, and everyone would happily pay it, regardless of your income level, because you spend way more than $200 just fussing around trying to get the thing smog. So I think the infrastructure is there. Now, the battle in the state and the Senate, I think, got really hung up on the insurance because now they're saying, well, this is sort of separating from who can have a classic and not. And it's like, no, you have a classic car. You get classic car insurance, which, by the way, not just Haggerty, but we're talking AAA, State Farm, Farmers, they're all getting in the game. In fact, Farmers bought Haggerty, didn't they? I think so. They're is it State Farm?
State Farm.
State Farm.
I think.
So they all want in there.
Is that recent? State Farm
a couple years ago.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
So So they got hung
They
up
bought
on
a
that.
percentage. They didn't buy them outright.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So there's, I think the infrastructure's there, but they were saying that if you have the plates and if an officer thinks like they see that car doing the same route every day, they can pull you over, cite you where you have to go to the CHP, just like if you have a Montana out of state plate, and you have to prove that you are using it lightly. So I think enforcement's going to be somewhat subjective, but at the end of the day, the cost to do it, there's so few. Like when I drive around every day, I look for 25-year-old or older cars. There's nothing out there, older than 90 that I see driving that isn't a specialty vehicle. Like no one
Yeah.
drives old shit except
Well,
us.
exactly. Well, you're forgetting our audience here, Paul.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem. We get sucked into our
90% drive
audience.
old shit.
We get sucked into it and we think we are everything. And then when you get to a state like California, and like I said, I think everyone in the government is on board with this in the state of California. I think the problem is the people, especially on the EPA side, who want to use this as a political football. They're going, "Oh, cool, we'll give you that, but we want this, something totally unrelated." And that's always where it gets hung up is you can't just get a bill passed. There's always backroom dealings where they're saying, okay, we'll vote yes on this, but we want you to vote yes on this and this and this. And that's my only fear because all my car friends have been asking me, and it is literally at Cars and Coffee in California, tariffs are backseat. This is what we're talking about is the smog. It means so much to us. And they're like, they all are drinking the Kool-Aid, think it'll pass. And I'm like, yet last night when I saw the vote, I was first time cautiously excited because I just felt like I've been here before and it gets hung up on the political back dealings that we will never know why. So, I mean,
Yeah.
here's the funny thing is the reason we're in this mess is because of Schwarzenegger, who is a car person, and he got his hands tied behind him because they were impeaching the other governor, and because he raised registrations like quadruple. I don't know if you were here, Tim, in California in 2006. Literally, if you had a $200 annual registration, it went up to like $1,000 or more. And talk about how to alienate your entire population in the state. And Schwarzenegger came in and says, hey, I'm going to go back to the old rates. That's all he had to do. Easily impeach the other guy, got elected. But what we found out very quietly was his sacrifice was the EPA wanted to get rid of anything old. They didn't care. And so
I don't think this is, you keep saying EPA. I'm pretty sure this is a California thing, not a
the
national
California,
thing.
or sorry, AQMD, Air Quality Management Division.
Doesn't that sound like for communist air quality in the socialist state of California? I think that's what you're describing. Yeah, I think so.
So what the deal was, which no one realized till 10 years later, but I knew it because I had a 78 turbo that would not pass smog. And when I smogged it in 2006, I was like, thank God, this is the last time I have to do it. And then this happened. I literally sold the car shortly after that. I couldn't pass smog. And I didn't have the dealership, to do it yet. I didn't have the insurance for it. So what he ended up doing was he acquiesced and said, okay, we're going to fix it it was 30 years rolling before Schwarzenegger came in. We're going to fix it at 30 years in 2006. And that's why we're stuck at 76. And if you have a 76 to 79 Porsche, no way. I don't care. No way.
Well, you're going to go to Montana and you're going to get historic plates and you're going to have lifetime plates and you're going to pay your $75 a year and you're going to put Montana plates on it. You're going to drive it at Cars and Coffee on Sunday. Your local cop's probably an old Porsche fan, so he's not going to pull you over or give a hoot. The only thing you got to worry about is some sort of, vindictive Karen living next door to you that's going to start taking pictures. And, there is a little, I'm sure this is still in place. We should move off this because it's going to trigger too many people thinking we're talking about politics, which we're not. But I remember in California, there is a little deal where you can, if you turn your neighbor in effectively or anybody for having out-of-state plates, you get some sort of bounty for that. I mean, who knows?
You didn't get a bounty, but you got the satisfaction. And I watched a person I know who had a truck with Idaho plates, and he parked it in front of his neighbor's house, not in front of his house. It was public street, and the neighbor kept asking him, like, "Hey, can you move your truck there?" And the guy wouldn't do it. So the neighbor just anonymously goes on the DMV website, reported the website. He gets a notice. He has to go to the CHP and verify under and also not perjure himself that the car is being used more than 6 months of the year. And so there is the personal satisfaction. I've watched my dad do it to someone who was not nice. So
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good time for us to have a little music break. So we have a new section in the podcast, and it's called this one in particular is it's a song that has been created by our only, I said created, not written or sung by our very only Greg Stanley, and it's going to be about tariffs. I'm a little nervous introducing it because hopefully he's got it. Hopefully I give him enough warning to get ready to play it. But when you are ready, sir.
All right. Do I have to share my screen for this, or how do I do it?
I don't think so. I think if you just hit play, you remember
All
your
right.
mic at the end of the mic is where the audio comes out. You have it on your phone, don't you? Could you just maybe put your
Oh, yeah.
speaker?
I just
Yeah.
put it on my phone here.
And we got to pick up the pace. We've been too politically minded. And Paul, I'm really shocked that you had the actual chapter and verse of all the actual, goings on amongst the Republicans and the Democrats.
All right, here we go.
Oh, here we go. Here, put it up here.
Dreaming about a shiny ride sitting over there. But there's a storm blowing, coming real fast. President's got a plan, and it's gonna hit at last. Tariff blues heavy on my mind. Price tags climbing like a mountain I can't find. Stealing wheels costing more every day. Tariff blues, and we're all going there.
All right, that's enough. All right. So here's your challenge. Next week, make an automotive themed rap.
I literally just texted Greg. We need a smog song in the vernacular of Snoop Dogg.
All
All right,
good.
we will do it. That's my challenge for next week.
Let's loop this back. All right. So I'm going to, this is a couple things of interest answering the intro question myself. Something I'm really excited about is that the V10s do appear to be returning to Formula One. And it's all looped back into the fact that they're now able to make synthetic fuel. And synthetic fuel, we talked about this on previous podcasts. You guys should be looking out for these headlines. It could very well be that we're going to see a sea change in the way that the government's EV green mandates globally are being rolled out, to the extent that I was listening on Chris Harris's podcast this morning, and they were talking about in England, they just pushed back the requirement for manufacturers to have a certain percent of their fleets be EV. To the extent that it's very reasonable to believe that, and this is happening in the EU as well, that those mandates, I think we're supposed to kick it in 2035, that were essentially the death knell for ICE-powered cars. All of those are going to be essentially, I think, frankly, we're going to see a lot more ICE-powered cars. And we're going to see ICE-powered cars powered by synthetic fuel, and the synthetic fuel, the net pollution essentially is environmentally friendly as EVs are. So what's incredible is that we very well could see electric cars. Obviously, they're still going to have a place in the marketplace, but they're not going to be forced upon all of us like they have been. I mean, Porsche is now saying we're going to make the 718 again, and guess what? It's going to have a gas-powered motor. And all these other manufacturers, look at that new Bugatti. You know, what is that, a V16 or something insane? I don't even remember what the hell it was. And the guy that owns, essentially has an ownership position in Bugatti, his focus now is on making gas-powered cars, not EVs. So anyway, that I thought was pretty incredible. And I don't know if you guys are, how much Formula One fans you are. Back in Michael Schumacher's era, when V10s were running around, that was just the peak of Formula One in my mind. So that was something. Any thoughts or
No, I'm excited by it because, when the e-racing started and there was all these rumblings that, F1 fans and car people were getting nervous that, sound is such a part of it. And I explained to people that it's better to watch F1 on TV with friends, but you have to go to an F1 race to experience it. And I went only one in 2001 in Indianapolis, which I think was still the V10 era. And there's nothing like the sound of it. And I think what I'm excited about is also now that the fuel, the synthetic fuel is coming out, stuff that starts in F1 eventually gets in cars, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. But I've always said, instead of electric cars, what about these alternative fuels? I know Porsche has been pushing it big, but as car people, imagine going to fill up and having no ethanol, 100 octane, like just the perfect blend. We can have like fuel bars and
Yeah.
hang it.
Well, I mean, but you can use the existing fleet on the road can all run off synthetic fuel. You don't have to modify the cars. The tankers that haul the fuel now are, dinosaur juice are going to be hauling synthetic fuel. Everything, the system stays effectively the same. But it is fascinating. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it is fascinating when you look to see the people that are starting to saber rattle against synthetic fuels, considering from the perspective that we just presented, they're completely against it. And again, they're politicizing things that shouldn't be made political. So us as car enthusiasts, when you start hearing more conversations about synthetic fuel, we've done the homework for you. And the bottom line is there's no downside. There isn't, except it needs to be mass produced. Because right now, and that's where people lean into, and it's right. The cost per barrel of synthetic fuel is through the roof, but they have to start mass producing it.
And just to say one quick thing on that, when I saw that, they're going back to V10s, and although unrelated, there's rumblings of Ferrari making a manual transmission car.
I read that too.
My first thought was, can you imagine V10 manual F1 cars? How cool that would be.
Oh,
Yeah,
to raise the skill level of the drivers, get manual.
Yeah, you'd see the track times drop, precipitously.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well,
it would be safer. The Swedish would go back to winning everything.
Totally. But it's funny. It's how many of these modern F1 drivers who are barely out of high school even know how to drive a manual transmission. None of them.
I wonder, that would be a funny thing to go to all the Formula One drivers, give them like a shitbox manual 80s car and then autocross and see who could do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge Formula One fan. Julie and I have been to a lot of races. It is, what's really extraordinary about Formula One, like most, highest level sports, the difference between winning and losing in Formula One is, it's just in terms of pure track time. Well, yeah, it's money for sure, but it's like a second or less than a second.
Yeah.
So you could take the slowest air quoting, Formula One car on the grid and, run it around the track, and it's going to be almost as fast as the fastest one. So it's really neat. And I'll give you guys a long-term prediction. I think Aston Martin is going to start dominating Formula One. They've got, it looks like Max is going to Aston Martin, if you believe the rumors. Adrian Newey's already over at Aston Martin. Aston Martin is going to have more influxes of cash. So I bet you within a year or two, we're going to start seeing,
there's one Achilles heel to Aston Martin is his son can't be on the team.
Well, I mean, yeah, there is that.
You need two really competitive cars to win.
Isn't that extraordinary that Lance has still got a seat? Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's like the poster child of
nepotism,
and silver spoon.
Being born on third base and acting like he hit a homer. So Julie, just along those lines, Julie and I know some of the Formula One drivers. We have a racing simulator that was built by Lando Norris's brother, Oliver Norris. It's called Cool Performance. If you guys want to check it out, I'm trying to get him on our podcast. And so I've gotten to know, I shouldn't have given all those names because now everyone's going to know where I heard these rumors. But in any event, I was asking, let's just say somebody else that's not either of those two guys, what their opinions are of the different drivers. And the stories that I heard were so freaking hilarious because these guys have known each other since they were kids. And they used to show up. I heard this very detailed story, and I've heard this from two different Formula One drivers where their dads, first of all, most of these guys come from very wealthy families. And they're back when these guys were, 10 years old and they're into go-karting, the dads would compete to basically who could have the freaking fanciest rig. And the story goes that Lance had his dad, dominated the war for, most show-offy rig and whatnot. But then his dad and Lance would start showing up at the different go-kart races in a helicopter. So they would fly in, and then sure enough, some of the other rich dads would start doing the same damn thing. And it was constantly top trump for who can spoil their son the most. So there you go. I thought that was kind of funny. A lot of other stories too, but maybe I'll hold those for a different podcast. And also I want to share with listeners, I mentioned this before, the center lock saga for Porsche. If you guys have a newer center lock recalled, wheel on your Porsche, we all got notices on these things. It was last October. September, October, we got these notices that said, do not drive your car. It'll cause certain death. Well, it didn't say that, but the gist of it was the wheel could literally come off the car, kind of like the worst case scenario. And you weren't supposed to drive the car. Well, they didn't have enough replacement center locks made until about 30, 60 days ago from the airing of this podcast. So that means if you were, dependent on your center locked wheeled 911 or 718 or whatever, there's a good chance you weren't driving it. And so Porsche, God bless Porsche, I start saying that, with air quotes again, but their remedy to make all that right with all of us that were stuck with undrivable cars was to give us a little sketch of our car, which wasn't a sketch of our car, it was just a generic sketch, and then a $2,000 gift certificate to spend at their tchotchke store. So all of you guys are getting Porsche branded tchotchke shit for Christmas. So congratulations.
Yay.
But we don't use our car, but I'm just thinking, if you were somebody that was dependent on that and you couldn't drive your car for 4 or 6 months, there's assuming you were financing it, car payment, insurance, and whatever the hell you had to buy or rent to make up for those lost months. And their remedy is, hey, here's a coupon to our swag store. But you guys have you heard anything about any rumblings about this, Paul, in your world?
I mean, I heard this was beyond the Carrera GT, right?
No.
Carrera GT was tires.
This was starting in 2023, 2024. It started out with the center locks, and there are center locks that were made for the RS cars for a very limited period of time. It was like 60 or 90 days. And it was essentially a VIN run, basically. That's what it was for. Not like all of them going back to the beginning of time.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was thinking about it. Literally, my mechanics texted me because we have a 2015 GTS we just sold that has center locks.
There you go.
And the owner wants to paint the wheels.
Yeah.
Thank God, because the owner's like, can I make the wheels silver? I'm like, do you know what that entails?
Yeah. And how about don't do that on a Porsche, Carrera GT. Didn't Porsche do a free upgrade recall voluntary on the Carrera GTs? Didn't you guys?
I thought it was a tire thing and they got free tires out of it. But
I heard it was tires and suspension and supposed to all in with,
yeah, it was tires and suspension, and you were not allowed to keep the parts, and it had to be done at a specific spot so that they took the parts with them.
Yeah, but that's what I heard too. But the all-in total for all the parts and labor is something like 150 grand.
Yeah.
And Porsche did this freaking voluntarily. And these cars were built in 2004.
Well,
that just tells you.
Or 2014. Sorry. Yeah.
No, the Carrera GT. They're talking about the Carrera GT, 2004 or 5. Yeah.
Okay, 4 or 5. Yeah.
I mean,
sorry.
I always felt like if you remember the debacle, the 991.1 GT3 and the engine stuff, which I wish like 000 or someone would do a deep dive on that because it's the most misinformation on the engine situation. But when they did that, they're still licking their wounds from the IMS bearing class action lawsuit. So I don't think Porsche is that altruistic. I think they're just German and they're like, we's got effed before. We will not do it again. And they just go. And I think and you think about it, even though it's a small number of cars, those are some of the most powerful buyers, all the Carrera GT owners. And they're like, we have to go way above and beyond. And it's funny, most people don't drive their Carrera GT, the reality. But the people I know who do drive them, they just said F it. And they just drove it anyway. They didn't care. And then they got a free set of tires and Porsche fixed it and made it great. And, that was that.
Off to the races. Well, yeah, all that sounds right. All right, so let's move on, guys. Let's talk about the biggest winners and losers. Seeing if any of you guys are going to try to back off that name. The biggest winners and losers over on Bring a Trailer. And let's not worry about being offensive because people will like our opinions on the biggest winners and losers. I might not participate because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So Greg, you go. So Greg, since you're the nicest amongst the three of us, why don't you go first? Yes, can I start?
So you guys are busting me on the text string here, but a Panther Pink 2023 Dodge Challenger Demon 170 jailbait just sold, quote unquote.
No, it should be called jailbait.
Jailbait was $450,000. Now I did research this, and I think Paul, you sent some stuff too. So the jailbreak, they only made like 26 of them, and each of them was their own color, and so that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday. He's thinking about buying a Demon 170 as an investment. And I said, how many did they make? And they made like 3,300 of those. So I'm like, do not get a red one. And so we had a conversation about get some sort of special color. And then you asked me to do this exercise, and I found this Panther pink. I thought that was pretty cool.
So I thought you were joking about that. Now that I know you like Panther pink cars, that is
Well, I
going to
don't say
be-
that. No. I like special colored cars that are rare. And this price point was astounding. So,
Okay.
now there was a Dino that sold. I say sold. It didn't sell. It was dating service set up a date with someone for $1,001,000. So a Dino broke, in theory, $1 million, which is pretty big. And then a 1993 GMC Typhoon, 688 miles, $226,000.
I 100% agree with you on that red truck. I had that starred as one of my favorites, and I thought that was extraordinary, actually. So yes.
Did I tell you my loser now?
Hopefully you're not taking any Paul's winners and losers list items, but go ahead.
I guarantee you this is not on his losers list. What is the cheapest running car ever bought on Bring a Trailer this year? Running car, I'll give you a hint. $1,050. V8, 5-liter V8, 17,000 miles. All right. This is where I was going to throw you.
Not a Mustang.
1981.
Mustang.
Nope. Buick Riviera Coupe.
Oh,
$1,000.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I remember that.
that seems like a bargain. I mean, Rivieras were always so pretty, and that was the one exception.
$1,000. I mean, come on.
What can go wrong?
What could
Yeah,
go
but those GM cars from that era were so bad. They
Yeah,
just
they
were.
But
Like
that's
the switches were not even made of metal. They were freaking had some sort of like paint on them, and over time it would chip off. It was unbelievable.
painted chrome. My wife loves it. She puts it on everything.
Those are my winners and losers.
I mean, but think about it, that Riviera. Those are
It's
the
a good
kind of
list,
dream-
Greg.
Great list, Greg. That's the kind of things you look for where you can fly into somewhere, buy the car instead of renting one, drive it around like you've come in for another country, drive it around, and then sell it before you leave. You know,
That's right.
I think
Take
it's
it to
great. I
Monterey.
mean, a rental. Imagine rolling around in that in Monterey, and even if you leaned into it and put logos, I bought this on BAT for $1,000. I mean, it'd be hilarious. I'm all
Yeah, you
for
just
it.
leave it there. Just park it at the airport and let's.
All right, Paul.
So-
It's your turn to play. But here's the only rule I'm going to add to this. We're now going to call this the Greg rule. We're never allowed to talk about pink cars on this podcast again.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Porsches, and I'd be like, I am screwed. So I took winners as I think a great deal, and I took losers as basically they're smoking crack. What are they thinking? So the loser to me, if I got that, I mean, that's my
No,
interpretation.
that's good. You can redefine the question. This is
So-
fluid.
It sold on my birthday last week. A backdated.
Late happy birthday. My bad.
Thank you. A
happy
backdated
birthday.
87 Porsche 911 Carrera G50 with a 3.8 liter. So it's an 87 Targa, G50 Carrera Targa, and it was backdated to look kind of singer-esque. And I think anytime everyone says, "Ooh, it's a budget singer," yeah, $415,000. I saw your eyes light up. $415,000. You add the fee in there, you're $422,500. This is one of my biggest frustrations. Everyone puts 17-inch Fuchs on their early cars or backdate cars, and they say, "Oh, well, Singer does it. It looks great." Singer redesigns the entire body to work with 17-inch wheels. This car looks like they stuck 17-inch wheel. They did the backdate normal, stuck 17-inch. I mean, I think Hot Wheels, they might win for that. And the builder of it, Patrick Motorsports, I think he's got a good name. I look at the fitment, the panel fit, which is really hard when you're doing a backdate. There was nothing besides a cool color. I think it was chalk.
Pink.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it now. Were these metal panels or are these composite? What's the?
They're metal
Rover?
panels. They're steel backdated bodywork. But basically it's a 964 motor built to 3.8, which I gotta tell you, is such a boring motor. I mean, it makes torque, but that's not what the car is about. They're kind of tractor motors. I know the 993 guys love them and so forth, but I think they're uninteresting. They're reproduction sport seats in a cool green. I want to say what color is the outside? It looks like
Chalk. I think
it's
it's
like
chalk.
light
Yeah.
gray, dolphin gray. So it's a 356 color, which I mean, I could see Mexico blue. When you look at the engine, it looks like something from Back to the Future where they put like HVAC hoses on the engine. Like it doesn't look like a pretty engine. And by the way, yeah, some of these backdates will do killer manifold. It's got a black painted fan. There was nothing about this that looked, I thought, great, and it sold for $400,000 plus. That, I mean, that's a car that will show up again at some auction platform, and I think it'll sell for half.
Now, but let me give you the counter to this, and I'm not disagreeing with anything you said because I pulled it up. I'm looking at the pictures, and I can even see more. Let's just call them discrepancies in the final design solution. Let's say, but to remake this car would probably cost a hell of a lot more than 400 grand, especially with labor rates like they are. So,
Oh, sure.
yeah, I mean, this is probably a $500,000 or $600,000 build, believe it or not. And he does have some really kick-ass parts on this too. If you click through and look at the
Yeah.
suspension and whatnot. So yes,
No,
but yes, I'm
it's
feeling
just-
sorry for this guy that you've now basically made him cry in his coffee as he's listening to us. And you, my friend, are going to be this is going to initiate our first nasty review on our podcast because you were being
Perfect.
honest. But
Bring it.
okay, let's
But you
go
know
ahead.
what? Like my dad always says, there's an ass for every seat. And, so long as the person loves it and, they don't care about what they spent, but when they go to sell it, they can't cry over whatever the result is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it sells for 700,000, but I just didn't see it. So that was my biggest loser in the fact that I think someone drastically overpaid. My biggest winner, and I've been outside Greg of 944s. This is the other car I've been proselytizing, is 991.1 Carrera S's. Base Carreras, Carrera S manuals. They're so cheap because everyone wants a 991.2 Carrera T or S, or they want a 997. And this is the car that everyone forgot. And it wasn't like they had this Achilles heel like IMS bearing, bore scoring, or any of the other crap that the Porsche people cry over. These cars don't have anything fundamentally wrong. So a few days ago, 2 days ago, and I see it's located back east, a one owner 2012. So this is a half year where 997 ended and 991 began. So it's an early 991 Carrera Coupe manual, base Carrera Coupe manual. It might be a slick top, no sunroof, one owner, 88,000 miles, platinum silver, black leather, and it sold for $49,000. Now, the only ding I saw was a Carfax minor damage, which isn't an accident. And it was like something in a parking curb. And this is what we can go on and on about how much I hate Carfax. But there was, I think, in the parking or something, the front lower spoiler lip got damaged and he had to repaint that in the bumper. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this was an original paint car. Silver, black, manual, coupe, 50 grand. I mean, and 88,000 miles, these cars are going to go hundreds of thousands of miles, hundreds of thousands. I literally looked at this thing going almost sort of pissed I didn't find it because I need to sell a couple cars, but I would say on my short list is a 991.1 manual coupe. I think they're bargains. I want a 991.2 Carrera T, but if this was a Carrera T, everything the same, it would be 35 grand more. And it's not, I've driven them both. They're not $35,000 better, 50% better. So that's my winner. Someone got a killer deal. When you look at the closing comments, everyone says the same. And by the way, that's what I do almost every day is look at cars in my wheelhouse on Bring a Trailer and I look at the closing comments because, perception is reality. And whatever the peanut gallery think is potentially what the reality is, why something either sold well or undersold. And by the way, everyone said on this car, someone got a killer deal. And when you look at the Targa backdate Singer wannabe monstrosity, everyone basically said, wow. And one of the guys I know, what was his comment? he said something basically the fact that what was this guy thinking? And I'm surprised it didn't get like blocked, but it was like literally, I'm like, what the hell? And then I saw that.
All
I'm
right,
like,
so we're gonna move past Paul's vitriol for that amazing Targa that's somebody's dream car who he bought for himself after toiling away his entire life, and he had romantic notions of going to, all these things around this world and doing this touring, but now he's tripping over this podcast and listening to Paul crap on his car. So we're gonna one of my personally, I think very well bought cars in the last month was a 1997 Ferrari 355 Spider 6-speed. And the thing I really liked about this one is Verde Silverstone Metallic, which is green, and the car I thought was gorgeous. But in my opinion, the 355 is going to go down historically as one of the most beautiful Ferraris ever made. If all of you have hopefully seen 355s, but they're so demure, they're so small, and they're so perfect, and they're so easy to put on the road. I had a 348 something Spider. I don't remember. I had it like 25 years ago, and that car was a monster in turns. A 355 is like a precision scalpel. So beautiful, such gorgeous cars. And when you get those, when the cylinder heads have been redone and the sticky buttons have been redone and the car's been taken after, that right there is a fantastic car. So I would say that car sold for 107 grand, which to my mind, I mean, good golly, that's still a lot of money, but what can you buy for 107 grand nowadays? That just seems extraordinary to me. And actually, I'll tell you, I'm not like I have very mixed feelings about Singers personally, but as far as I think that Ferrari was well bought, I think the Singer here that I'm about to tell you guys was well sold. 1991 Porsche Singer Carrera 2 Coupe by Singer, right? It was a classic. I don't remember the build year on this one. It's funny that both my cars this week are green. The Singer is a beautiful car. I don't have anything against the car necessarily, but for $1 million, every time I see, is this supposed to be, yeah, this is supposed to be my well sold cars. Every time I come across one of these, and I've driven a Singer before, and I thought it was a great car. I'm not in any way saying anything bad about what Rob created. But I just don't get the prices on them. I just don't. I don't understand why you'd spend $1 million. And you're going to say, oh, Tim, it's not your first Porsche. It's your 10th Porsche. And you have 14 other Porsches and you have I get all that. I understand all the, the flexing that comes from owning a Singer. And I probably have 10 Singer buyers. 8 out of 10 are probably buying it just to add to their hoard. But the 2 car guys, that buy these cars, I wonder if they went and looked for what genuine Porsche back catalog options would have been. And don't tell yourself that they've got them, so they just bought this because they wanted something more. But I would have bought a 993 GT 2 or 993 GT with the tack on flared fenders, and it was essentially a race car built for the road. I can't wrap my mind around these modern resto mods being something that are really that much superior. I know all the touch points are just amazing, but I personally, I don't think I'll ever understand it. And I did also notice, it's funny, what was that other resto rod company in California, Paul, that does
the Gunther Works. The Gunther Works.
They're not going to start modifying electric cars. Is that what I heard? Yeah, I think he's hot
Yeah.
rodding Teslas now or something.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing is I know Rob very well, known him for a long time. I admire what he did. I've never really got on board the Singer one or whatever it is. I do think his turbo study is really interesting, and I really, really like that. But my problem, to your point, Tim, is if you're going to drop 7 figures for something, there are so many other choices. I mean, I would go order something from Roof. I would fly out there, and I mean that's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
Or
but
I would
Paul,
go to
why
Tuttle
would you
and
just get a freaking 964 Turbo S, and just get one of
because
those?
I'd already have one. This
Well,
is the
but no.
car.
See, I think I get it, but that's a cop out thing that people say, and it's though probably true. I just don't. In the future, this is my point. In the future, in someone's 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, when somebody's looking to build out a little Porsche, collection, let's say, and the word collecting in itself, I don't really particularly like, but just leaving it there. Are they really going to be going after somebody's version of what a classic, Singerized 911 is going to be from, 10 years prior? Or are they going to want to buy something that's, a classic Porsche? that's truly a unique, I just don't know. But even if you set aside values, the user experience of a Singer cannot be that superior to the user experience for the 2 guys out of 10 that actually are car enthusiasts, not just collectors. I can't be convinced that the user experience is that much better. Opinions.
I
Well,
agree. It's fun. Well, real quick, it's funny that you mentioned that particular Singer because I was going to pick that as my sold well, but there's a lot of Singers that have sold at $1 million. So I honestly thought it was kind of boring answer. So I want to be a little more polarizing with my pink. Thank you very much.
You did it.
All right. All right. So, but I agree with you. I think they're fantastic works of art. They're tremendously well built. This color spec isn't to my taste. If I'm spending $1 million, I want it a little more customized, not pink, but something, maybe a dark burgundy or I don't know, something where,
Greg, Greg, there was a pink Singer Targa that
There
sold
was.
a month ago.
Thank you for pointing that out. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been in a Singer. I enjoyed it. It's kind of like, well, it's any car argument, when my wife and I go out looking at new cars, it's like, was that a $20,000 more exciting experience than the other car we just drove?
Well, but stop there, Greg. That's such a really freaking good point. And that was actually one of the questions I had today. I'll skip a couple of my questions, but I mean, do you guys have time?
Yes.
You guys
Yeah.
good? Okay. So Greg, you just actually brought something up that I think about a lot. I
Well,
think that, yeah, we're car nerds, right? We all share the same, inferior brainwave. I personally think that most cars nowadays feel and drive the same. And I think the uniqueness, especially amongst new cars, is branding bullshit. And I'm going to give you an example. So, Lamborghini. Okay. Let's just look at the Lamborghini, not the Murcielago or the Revant. I can't even pronounce the new name. Like them, hate them, doesn't matter.
Rovet. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So the cars, the Gallardos and those cars were German. Basically, Julie and I have been to Lamborghini. I told this story in the show before, and we saw the assembly line. And those guys, the body in whites, which were painted bodies, were coming in from Austria, I believe. And then the parts that were being assembled, that were being bolted into these, bodies in white, were all from mostly Germany. And you literally saw off to the side a pile of boxes that said Sparco on them. So the seats were coming from Sparco. The guys were just assembling them, spanners. And wheels were getting bolted on, all the damn parts. They don't even try to hide the fact. Volkswagen Audi. Is that an Italian car because it's assembled in Italy? Now, I'm trying to make a grander point here. So when Porsche starts making 911s in Chattanooga, Tennessee, are we all of a sudden not good? Is that going to be a different experience? So when we were all growing up, cars definitely, you could feel the difference in the 80s and the 90s. And then beyond that, they started to lose their points of differentiation because of all the parts sharing and the chassis sharing and the engine sharing and, so on and so on. So, I mean, look at, for example, the engine sharing that goes on in just sticking with the VAG family, right? Porsche, Volkswagen, Audi. And you look at the V8, Julie and I have an RS6 Avant. That twin turbocharged V8 is in every freaking car. And they changed the software here and other. So I've gotten to the point where I'm really wondering if I'm just some sort of dumb lapdog who's being manipulated into spending more money for this. And Paul, you shouldn't have agreed when I said I'm a dumb lapdog that fast. I saw your eyebrows. But I just wonder, I honestly wonder if we're just all these stupid apes who are easily being manipulated into thinking that something is a different experience because they have convinced us so because of the marketing and branding. Discuss.
Yeah, no, I feel that way. And it goes back to literally the newest thing I own that I drive is a 2004. And it's a 996 GT3, which is the newest thing that, as you know, Tim, drives as close to an old car. I mean, 996 GT3 drives like an old car. When people go, "Ooh,
I
996,"
freaking love those cars. I had a speed yellow one when we were living part-time in Southern California. And it is awesome. People, if you've never driven one of those cars, I'm not going to say it's the prettiest car or frankly, the interior is the best built car, but the driving dynamics of that thing are batshit crazy. It has ABS, but no traction control or something.
Yeah, ABS is the only assistance. And I'm sure that Porsche would have rather left that off, if not probably some, world law or safety law. But no, and I just, every time I look at a new car and I think about it, I kind of come to your realization. I was agreeing that you're not a dumb lapdog, but like you feel like you're being played because I look at these.
Manipulated.
Yeah, you feel like you're being manipulated because everyone, and I always say it feels like the emperor has no clothes. I know the 991.2 GT3 Touring is like the new holy grail, and I drove them. They're really nice, but they weren't earth-shattering different to me. They didn't like, I mean, we're talking like going to 31 flavors and ordering a triple scoop of all the different version of vanillas. I mean, they kind of all taste similar, a little different. And like when I was, the 991.1 Carrera manual, the reason I like that is like, oh, this is a Porsche I could use as a regular car. And they're really cheap. And the difference between that and the hot rod model isn't worth the 100% markup. They're shades of gray. But other than that, my daily driver in the garage right now, which I just locked the keys in, so I'm excited about that, was my 84 928. I drive that every day. I love that car. And it's an automatic.
But those cars that are made in that era, when you drove a freaking 928, it was, even amongst the Porsche family, it felt like a freaking 928. Now, when you
Yes.
drive our Audi RS6 and then you drive a freaking Bentley that has got the same motor, or you drive the Porsche products that got the same motor, they don't feel that different. It's just that little logo in the middle that makes you feel however they're wanting you to, feel that. So it's so weird to me that it is so obvious that these cars are all basically the same. Can I share another story that's kind of interesting? All right,
Sure.
so we were over in Pininfarina, and this was a while ago. We went on this car guy tour, Italian car guy tour. Frank doesn't do them anymore, and he got us into all these amazing places in Italy. So we went to Pininfarina, and this is back when Pininfarina was still designing for Ferrari before they took it in house. And one of the designers, I'm just going to tell the story as I remember it, took an interest in Julie. I was off with the group, and Julie was looking at these pictures on the wall, and this designer started talking her up and chatting her up. And Julie's analytical, and she started listening to everything he was saying. And then I walked up about 15 minutes after they were having this little conversation. And Julie asked him, what's your favorite design? What's your favorite brand to design for? And he wouldn't answer the freaking question. And then because what we found out was they weren't allowed to say, just cutting to the punchline, they weren't allowed to say that they were designing for Korean cars. Pininfarina had a contract with, and if you look at all these new freaking Korean cars that have started coming out probably within the last 15 years, some of them are freaking gorgeous, better design than anything else that's coming out of, even, dare I say, Italy. And it's because they're freaking Italian designed. So we asked him why, and he said, because when you meet with a Korean manufacturer, he said they're not trying to bring in any of the legacy design elements into the new design. They'll say, we want to design a 5-door, we want to design a this or the other thing, and we don't need you to bring in this element from a 928 and this element from this historical sort of mismatch, the best ofs, So, Greg, what are you thinking?
They're not constrained, right? They're allowed to do what they want. You don't have to have, it was such an outrage when Corvette lost, and the C7 lost the round circle taillights that have been around for decades. That was such a headache because it was heritage, tradition, all that kind of stuff. So I could see them wanting to go and then have the freedom to do what they want without, you got enough constraints with crash tests and pedestrian heights and bumper heights and all that other kind of stuff. I can see them wanting to go elsewhere. And I can also see the designers not wanting to share that.
Well, when did cars lose their I don't want to say soul, but I'm going to say it just to make the point succinctly. When did cars lose their soul? Or did they lose? Or did they?
Jay Leno likes to say that 66 was the last year where you had true automotive freedom because you didn't have all the constraints and everything. That really didn't come in place till 68, where you had to have a lot of the safety stuff. 69, you had to have the headrest on the back of the seat. 68, you had to have the side blinker lights, minimum heights on the roof and some of the bumpers. And so I'm just quoting Jay. He said, 66, 67 is the last year of automotive freedom from a design perspective.
Do you
Would you
agree with that,
Paul?
though, Greg? Do you agree? I mean,
no, I think they've really gotten around it. I mean, I look at some of the cars today. I love the SP3 Ferrari. I think that thing is stunningly gorgeous. It's very creative. I mean, the fact you have a McLaren, what's that thing called? The one without a windshield, basically. We got the SP3,
Alva.
the SP or SP2, SP1. the fact that they're able to get around it in some crazy ways, just they're, genius. But I do think we have lost some of that.
Let's hover there where you just said, and then I want to go back to because the question I wrote down is, can cars have a soul, and do they have? Is there a national soul? Do German cars feel like German? I think we've kind of mashed that up maybe at this point where they're all not feeling that unique anymore. Um, Now I forget what I was about to ask you. Oh, so as far as cars that truly feel unique nowadays, in my opinion, unless you're going to go to the little craft made cars, the only two brands that really are making cars that when you sit in them and you are smelling the smells and you're touching the touches and you're driving the drive, the only two cars that really have unique feel anymore are McLaren and Ferrari. And Ferrari, definitely. When you're in a Ferrari, there's no cousin car. It's not like a Volkswagen Audi product where you can kind of like, oh, I see this, I see this, I feel this, I feel this. When you're in a Ferrari, Ferraris are truly unique, and McLarens are the same way. Whether I don't think Ferrari will ever change, but whether McLaren does, I don't really know, especially with new ownership and whatnot. Do you guys have any opinions on that?
I don't drive anything new very often, so I mean, I think the newest Ferrari I've driven is a 430. So,
Well, but
and
even
really, my
yeah,
my lexicon for automotive just sort of ends around the. I think going back to your other question about where does design end? It's to me somewhere in the mid 2000, late 2000s, 2005
give
to
an example.
2012.
Give an example.
Well, in the Porsche world, 997.2, I felt was just the last version of the classic 911, which isn't really, it's kind of 996, but it still looks more 911. It hasn't been squashed and stretched out and gotten truly
Mm.
bigger. I think in Ferrari, I think the 430 was a little bit of that. The problem was most of them were a crappy gearbox. The F1 gearbox was not great. I think BMW, you know, arguably the E90 was really interesting, and I love those. That's another car I think is undervalued because that V8 is really special. But then when you get past that to what is after the E90, the F80 or whatever, they kind of start to look homogenous and uninteresting. And yes, they're fast. And I feel like all these manufacturers are just trying to compete on 0 to 60, Nürburgring lap times, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I did drive a 2000, we sold a McLaren, I think it was a 2017 or 18 570S, nothing special. I drove it. It did feel interesting. I mean, I felt like I was wearing a costume of someone I really wasn't. I mean, so it was hard for me to get over that because
Somebody young, handsome, and cool. Was that the costume that you were wearing?
when the cop pulled me over, I think he thought that's what he was going to get, and then he realized, oh, just fat white bald dude. So he was trying to figure out what to give me, and so he's like, put your license plate on. And so I go, but isn't that what McLaren guys do? No plates. I
In
just
California. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to put my dealer plate on. But when I was driving that car, and that's kind of like the newest supercar thing I've driven, my thought was when I get past all that, it I was like, please don't break on my watch because it was an older McLaren. But it did feel, the thing I remember being shocked about because I drove it up to the mountains. So I did like a 200-mile round trip with the freeway. Driving on the freeway, super easy. Like S-Class Mercedes comfortable. And then I got to the mountain road and it was a Spider. I put the top down. It took a bunch of tries because it kept saying there was an error. But eventually, when I got it down, I was like, wow, this is a really dynamic experience. It was too fast for anything. I mean, it was ridiculously fast. So I couldn't go at a speed that I felt like it was exciting. It was just unique. But and then I began to think, I'm sure all of these supercars, Lamborghini, Ferrari, have flavors of this where they can do. I mean, do you remember when a supercar would beat the crap out of you? Like you would never daily drive a supercar. You had to be like some Hercules character to do that. And now all of these cars are made to be used for everything, like a one car solution. And I kind of wish they would make them suck at one thing.
Well, but we're saying the same thing, right? So they're chasing this, I use this term too much and I don't use it in real life, but it just makes the point. They are seemingly chasing a lifestyle flex type buyer. That seems to be where a vast majority of these guys, that's the reason you got to freaking love Porsche for the GT3 RS. I mean, that car hates you.
Yes.
You got to be a
Yes.
masochist to drive that son of a bitch. And I love it for that,
Yep.
Yeah.
And the
So
personality of the owner that loves it comes out. When I look at Matt Farah and Johnny Lieberman. Johnny loves it. He wants to go fast all the time. He wants race car all the time. He also lives at the foot of Angeles Crest, so it's his backyard. Matt Farah, it's an hour slog on the shitty freeway to get there. He just hates that car. It's impractical. It beats you up. And do I want one? Not really, but I appreciate it, like you said, for that, because it's not a mixed identity. It's not trying to be for everyone. Ironically, the the supercar that I always intrigued, and it's no big surprise, isn't the Dakar, but it's the Lamborghini Sturato. I guess is that the off-road one? Because I just think the irony of taking this thing that's so, Lamborghini is such the cars and coffee, I've got money flex, and then going in the dirt with it, which is exactly what I would do. I mean, Dakar, people do that stuff anyway with Porsches. No one does that with Lamborghini. And there was, I think, Sam to the Looking Glass was at Good Vibes Breakfast Club last week, and he brought a press one up, and it was pretty hilarious because, Johnny's like, well, let's go take it off road. And they went off road up in Angeles Crest, and I don't think the press company was aware that that was going to happen. So
that's supposed to be a legitimately good car too,
yeah.
engineering wise. Yeah, that's really cool. What do you think about all this banter, Greg?
Oh, it's just crazy. I don't have as much experience in the new cars as you guys do. I go back to the 60s and that's most of it, or just, used cars that are about 20 years old. So I need to get my butt in some new stuff for sure. I want to jump in. If I had a chance to drive anything right now, I would love to drive. Chris Harris just did this recently. F1, the McLaren
Oh
F1.
yeah.
I don't know if you saw that video, but he had a proper turn in one, and that was the car that had been on his wish list forever. And I know that new W1 is floating out there now, the prototype and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see when that thing comes to fruition. Yeah, just some crazy stuff out there. But it's amazing they can do what they do based on all the rules and regulations that are out there for pedestrian safety and such.
So there seems to be a return to station wagons. There seems to be a return for people. I agree. There seems to be a return for people demanding station wagons. It was BMW that came out that said they couldn't believe the demand for the M5 Touring. And I think hopefully one of you guys are going to fire this up on the Google. Supposedly they're going to sell a touring version of the M4, I think, or the M3. I always get those nomenclatures confused. I come from a world where an M3 is an M3 and now an M3 is an M4 and an M4 is an M3. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, me too. What the hell, people?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, and I'm just wondering. So the big, if you guys had to choose between I can't answer this because I already have chosen between RS6 Avant or the Porsche Taycan, wherever the hell it's called,
Sport Turismo,
or the BMW M5. What would you choose? And have you seen all of those cars? Like, have you guys seen a new M5? Okay, so what would you choose and why?
I would choose an Aston Martin Vanquish Zagato shooting brake or a Ferrari Lusso.
The Lusso is actually a very interesting point. I was thinking about that. Those cars have really depreciated to the point where, yeah, like Graham Rahal has got I don't know if you guys saw this on BAT. Graham Rahal has got a Audi RS6 Avant GT with all of the stickers on it for sale right now on BAT. And I don't know if you guys know Graham, but one of the sweetest, nicest guys. I, for a very short period of time, worked for his dad when he was racing Indy cars in Hilliard, Ohio. By working for him, I literally pushed a broom, and that was the extent of it. This was when I was between high school and college. But in any event, so he's got that car up, and the sticker on it was 205, and I think it's sitting right now on BAT at 205. Could you guys drive that car with those stickers on it? Could you do it? Could you pull it off? Could you rock that look, Greg?
I could. Yeah, I could.
I could too.
I mean, you see the crap I drive. Everything's got stickers, and all my cars have an avatar and costume they're wearing. Those three cars. Here's the reality. I don't think any of them stir any emotion. I mean, they're pretty. And even when you get outside of the whole BMW weight thing, I think all new cars are heavy, and that's just what it is. And they're competent. I mean, of those, I would choose the Mercedes E63 wagon if I'm going to really go to something like that. None of those three I like.
Okay.
I like the Audi Avant. I think that thing's wicked crazy. Really cool. I mean, the exhaust pipes on that thing are huge, and blacked out. I don't know. When you see one of those, I think those things are pretty cool.
So when you visit us when we're in Murphy starting tomorrow, you can drive ours.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah,
I do
yeah,
want them
they're
to bring back like let's bring back the E39 wagon, you know, like
yeah, totally,
distill it
totally.
down to that,
So,
you
so
know.
the next layer to this conversation is: do you think they're going to be bringing back vans? Since we're having a return, a rejection of SUVs, let's hope, and now we know that Avants are going to start making a comeback. Are they going to start bringing back vans? And I have a Porsche trivia question that Paul can't answer, so it's just up for you to. Hey, Greg, I'm going to text you something really quick.
I mean, going regarding vans, I mean, the ID Buzz is, I think, maybe the gateway drug to that. I mean, after 20 years of teasing us with the ID Buzz, which was, the revival of the Volkswagen, bus or van again. Um, I think, I think the vans, I mean, aren't vans just wagons that are lifted? Kind of like that's what sort of crossovers are, and what now they're going to put the engine in the inside the cabin.
But
I don't
aren't SUVs and crossovers just hatchbacks that are lifted? I mean, you could say that about anything,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the coolest, Greg has an opinion on this. Hopefully you got my text. The coolest by far van ever made by any manufacturer is,
Do you want me to say
yeah, it'll impress Paul. Watch, he'll drop his hat.
Porsche B32?
Oh, mic drop.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah,
I've not sold one of these, but there was a lot of people who've gone out and tried to make them to various degrees of success. But we had a Wolfsburg edition that someone put a 964 drivetrain, did an amazing job. I
it
mean,
was
the
white,
gate,
right? Or blue.
no, it was blue. It was the
Yeah.
Wolfsburg edition, kind of that gunmetal blue. It was down in San Diego. It had 996 GT2 big red brakes on it. That's the only thing I didn't like because he had the 996 GT2 wheels, which looked really dumb on it. But other than that, it was completely stock looking. The gauges the guy got to work. I mean, it was really done well. And the first time I drove it, driving a van again with 290 horsepower is a bit startling, and it stopped great. But the first time I did a clover leaf and I almost tipped the thing over. And I called the owner. I'm like, what the hell? He goes, oh, I never got to the suspension. Bone stock Vanagon suspension with 290 horsepower and brakes. And I was like, how did you not? But they are unsettling to drive. I can't imagine what the factory B32 is. But if I had all the money in the world and I was going to be collecting stuff, it's shit like this, like the weird factory. One of my favorite, and it is, do you remember the 928 that they disguised as a VW Rabbit, Mark One Rabbit?
No, I
It
don't.
is awesome. When they were testing in the late 70s or mid 70s, imagine a VW Rabbit. They cut in the middle and widened it.
Oh, I
And
do
and
remember that.
and so it until you put it next to another one, you didn't realize how wide it was. We're talking like a foot wider, but the interior looked just like a 928. It had everything was 928. Just do VW Mark One Rabbit, Porsche 928. And I would have one of those. I'd have one of these Vanagons. Any manufacturer that did something. Remember Renault did the Espace? They did a minivan with an F1 drivetrain.
I don't remember that.
It's like called a Renault Espace, and it was hilarious. They took it to like I think Nürburgring with an F1 driver, and they had passengers in it. And you're watching basically it looks like a Chevy Lumina van, or whatever the transport. Remember those ugly looking transport
Yep.
van? Um, except it sounds like an F1 car. So if you go back in history, just Google Renault Espace space F1, and it looks absolutely badass. And there are history of manufacturers taking regular pedestrian cars and doing just silly crap with it. And imagine if you could go find these cars and have a collection of them. That would be my hero for sure.
Real
You don't
quick,
want to go ahead.
I do have to go in a second, but real quick, I was in a restoration shop and they were doing a Westfala conversion, but the whole thing was redone and it had a Cayman S engine in the back, and every single part of metal was touched on this inside outside. And they said, yeah, this is going to be $1 million van.
Well, for sure, because that's the worst type of conversion to do, because that's a water cooled motor. And if you put an air-cooled motor in, because you got to run all the water lines. So if you think about the engineering complexity of something like that, that is bonkers hard to do. So
Yeah.
I have a little surprise for you guys. I'll be showing it to you the next week or so. We have a little T25 Volkswagen van again that might happen to be a B32. We'll have to see.
Ooh, there's Paul lighting up right now.
Yeah, but it's sitting in our garage in Murphy, North Carolina, and it's funny. I had a friend go there. We have quite a few cars in there, and I had a friend go there last week. Carl, thank you. I know you're listening, and to get everything started, and everything freaking needed work to get started again, except the freaking Volkswagen van just started on first click. It was crazy. So listen, I want to give acknowledgement. We've had a ton of people giving us great feedback and a lot of interesting comments over on Instagram. And if you guys want to get hold of us, and I don't know if you guys are following the comments on Instagram, but one of the biggest things that we're getting comments on were about the sizes of cars, because people had never really considered the fact that how really, gross the size of modern cars have gotten, primarily in America. That was a really hot topic. Did you guys catch any of that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
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 I recognize
Well,
some of those
look at the
people.
911. Geez, that thing's monstrously large now.
It is monstrously loud. If you put, we have a 718 Spider RS. If you park that next to, say, for example, another car I'll show you guys, the 73 RSR, and you park those two side by side, the 73 looks like a matchbox compared to the 718. It is extraordinary how big modern cars have gotten.
Even, and I didn't snap a picture of this, but my neighbor has a new ST, and he pulled it out, and I had that 997.2, and I parked it next to it, just moving around. A 997.2, fairly modern car, next to a new 992. Shocking how small that 997 is.
If you've never driven a small car, viewers, listeners, and you're hearing us bemoan about weight and size and all that, just go do yourself a favor and drive one. But I have to say your user experience is going to be somewhat unsettling for the first time, because a small, light car completely feels different than one of these big, heavy, monstrous things, especially with all the electronic gizmos and the witchcraft and alchemy making it stay on the road. So when you drive one of these cars, like what we all have passion for, be ready to be more wired in than you could possibly imagine in where all your inputs are. Not only that, but you're going to have to be listening, watching, smelling to make sure it's not on fire, all those good points. Good. So listeners, thank you. We love obviously doing this podcast. That's, if you want proof of that, just look at the past 90 minutes that went by. If you've got any topics or suggestions or ideas for us, I've got mountains and mountains of things that I'd love to focus on, but I got to be respectful of these guys' times. Greg's got to go. So Greg, if someone wants to get hold of you to put an amazing car on consignment with you for an upcoming Sotheby's RM auction, how can they get hold of you? And could you mind sharing with us maybe something that pops to mind as far as something really cool that you're chasing right now that you're hoping to have at auction sometime soon?
Yes. G Stanley at rmsotheby's.com. Just reach me directly there. Or on my podcast, Greg at the Collector Car Podcast. You can find me or even on Instagram at the Collector Car Podcast. Anywhere is fine. Yes, I was in a crazy collection last week. I don't know that anything will happen, but it's a guy that's over 80, and he's got no siblings, no kids, no anything. And he's got like 30 cars, and there's 2 Ferraris he bought like in the early 70s. And he's got 7 Ferraris. He's got 5 Vipers, but some really, really cool stuff. But what was amazing is he had like 1,000 early 1900s metal toy ships. Just crazy stuff. So anyways, I don't know what will happen there. Some really, really cool cars. I'm headed down to Northern Florida next week, chasing a couple things. I can't get too specific. I am possibly looking at a 54 Corvette, which would be interesting. And then the following week, I'll be at Keels and Wheels outside of Houston. Really just kind of a networking thing. I've got some people I'm meeting with to visit their collections. Don't know what are in some of those collections. One of them does have 40 Shelbys, though. So I'm looking forward to that. So.
Is that the picture you showed us? All those Shelbys lined up?
No, that's another guy. So.
I cannot believe, dude, the collections you find are extraordinary. That's just crazy.
There's a lot of really cool stuff. And a quick plug, I am launching Octane FM, a lot of fun songs like you just heard. I've got one about John Wick's Mustang was not even a Boss or a Mach 1. I've got PTS, Porsche Tax Syndrome. You got to pay extra for paint. So there's a lot of fun stuff coming out.
You are an artist for sure. Between your book and the songs that you're now creating, you definitely, I think, are finally finding your calling.
Well, I'm going to have 944 Turbo for Paul. I also Supercar Dreams, Minivan Life. I really like that song. So these are launching right now. So check them out.
Paul?
He's the Weird Al Yankovic of automotive music.
I'll take it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I know this is going to be shocking. In
A
24
rally?
hours, yes, I am leaving tomorrow morning at 5:30 in the morning on a 10-day rally called Get Lost 2000. We're going to go up to Lost Coast of California. And by the way, I've driven quite a few different roads around Western U.S. to Texas. If you haven't driven north of San Francisco towards the Oregon border, it's insane. In fact, this was the last rally we did up there. We nicknamed it the Jefferson State Rally, but it was a rally through the Redwoods. Beautiful roads. So I'm going to be doing that in my green 911 backdate Tortuga. And to find me, Auto Kennel, Instagram, website, has all the contact info. And if you go to our website, sign up for the emails. And I sometimes repost them on our Instagram, but that's where I can talk about the cars we're selling in a way that I can't do on a normal listing. I can say sort of my behind the scenes.
And you do too. That's the reason I always love doing business with you, because you don't pull punches. Because you know I'm a picky MFer, and if I say, Paul, is this for me? And you'll say, nope. I don't want to hear you bitching in my ear for the rest of my life why you bought that car. And you
Exactly.
Yep, I've had that happen with you before, and I respect that. You know, but it is interesting, guys, and I'm going to say this as a plug to both of you, is that I'm going to venture a guess, your business is going to be done not because something is publicly for sale. It's basically matchmaking to a buyer and a seller. And most, that's the way business is done. And I venture a guess that, Paul, you in particular, 90%, you know who the buyer is for the car, even when someone calls and says, I'm ready to sell it, and vice versa, So, I mean, if you get exactly all that. And so if you guys are looking to have good long-term relationships with some car people you can trust, well, here you guys go. So make sure you reach out to these two fellers. In the meantime, if you've got any good podcast suggestions, any good topics, any questions, any user feedback, please give us 5-star reviews over on iTunes. Make sure you follow us on Stitcher. That's a new one. You got to get on that one, Greg. Stitcher, Spotify, but we certainly appreciate your continued support, and do please communicate with us primarily through our Instagram handle, which is, of course, Full Throttle Talk. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show next week.